All right, guys, let's cut up a chuck roll. All right, first of all, what is a chuck roll? This comes from the chuck or the shoulder region of the cow. This one's about 20 pounds. It's a kind of typical size. You can pick these up at most of the big, kind of the big supermarket places like Costco, Sam's Club. Some of the wholesale places that chefs go to will be even cheaper. Now, I picked this one up. It was 20.62 pounds at $7.39 a pound for a total price of $152.38. I know you've seen other videos out there with cheaper prices. Obviously, meat prices in general has just gone up recently. You probably can still get this under $5 a pound if you look around. But I find that Costco has pretty good quality meat. 20 pounds of meat, $7 a pound for some pretty high-end, high-quality stuff is not a bad price. Typically, what most people will get out of these is, obviously, most of you are familiar with the chuck roasts. We'll be able to get a couple of those. We'll be able to get several of the so-called Denver steaks, sometimes known as you.what steaks or zabuton steaks. Those are actually a underappreciated and a really delicious cut of meat. Also, some chuck eye steaks. Sometimes some people refer to those as Delmonicos. And you have to remember, a lot of cuts of meat are called different things throughout different parts of the world. So this will be my first chuck roll, which is a value cut for those that are struggling to make ends meet financially. This is a pretty good way to do this because you can actually probably cut the price probably at about half of what you would normally pay for these steaks individually cut up collectively. All right, let's talk a little about some of the supplies you're going to need. Now, obviously, you're going to need a large cutting board or cutting surface. You could cover this island with butcher's paper or something like that if you wanted, but a cutting board always works nice. And then you want to have a couple knives, relatively sharp knife. You want a little bit of a narrower, smaller knife to do some of the fine work and a larger knife to maybe cut the whole steaks. And obviously having sharp knives is really important, and I'm going to use this little rolling device here to go ahead and sharpen up my knives since I haven't sharpened them in a little while. This is, I think, called the Horl, H-O-R-L. Okay, obviously we're going to start by getting it out of the package, so get some, nice kitchen shears are also another good thing to have around the kitchen. These came from a company called Dalstrong, I believe. Generally, most of the meat you're going to see these days in the grocery store is going to be a choice cut, which is actually pretty good. I mean, it's reasonably well marbled. In years past, we didn't have as many options, but they've gotten better at finishing animals to the point where we get a lot of choice grade and prime grade meats. And so, obviously, a little paper towel to clean up all the, now this isn't blood, this is myoglobin. Some people don't understand that, but cows do not have any blood in them by the time they reach your plate. The blood has long been drained out. This is all the red stuff. It's just myoglobin. Okay, like I said, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut off some of these little loose ends here. Again, nice sharp knife always makes your job a lot easier. There's a couple other scraps here on the other side that I'm going to take out. One thing that I have found is that, you want the meat cold. Certainly it's harder to deal with when you have meat that is kind of jello in your hands, but you don't want it frozen. If it's frozen, then it's impossible to cut through. So we're going to find this natural plane between the muscles, and we're just kind of pull and tear and just trying to, gently separate out this section, these two muscle groups here. So I'm just going to kind of gradually just kind of work my way through, pulling this stuff up little by little, and you can kind of see the natural separation in here. From about here to about here is where I can visualize those steaks coming from. So I'll probably get, about 4 of those steaks out of there. I like my steaks, at least an inch and a half thick, sometimes 2 inches, and that's because it's just easier to cook a nice medium rare steak. All right, so we've freed up that kind of first portion there, what I'm going to call the Denver portion there. I'm going to put that off to the side. Now we're going to go ahead and kind of trim off some of this, some of this hard fat that most people prefer not to eat. All right, we're going to flip it over. And again, we're just gonna trim off some of this, fat on the back side here. Okay, now on this end of the beast, I flipped it upside down. You can see kind of this part here, and this is where, particularly this little piece here, this is where I think we're gonna see some what's called the chuck eye steaks. Kind of the cheap ribeye, or again, some people will call this a bit of a Delmonico. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just kind of take off a section here where I think I'll get my chuck eyes out of. So about right here, cut that all nice and through. And we can see, it still has a bit of that ribeye sort of appearance to it. So that is what we're kind of looking for there. And then again, I'm going to cut, like I said, I like a little bit thicker steak, so I'm going to cut about an inch and a half here, inch and a half. And I think I might have this one for my lunch today, perhaps. All right, so now we got, basically chuck roast at this point. Some people call these chuck steaks, and they cut them up into chuck steaks. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of separate a nice kind of rectangular piece out of here. This can turn into basically chuck roast, and I, like I said, I tend to eat these by myself, so I'm gonna cut these into about, maybe I'd say about 4 pieces. We're gonna go back to this sort of Denver side. And again, we're gonna cut these also into steaks. And again, like I said, probably a nice inch and a half would be my preference. Again, you can decide what you prefer. 5 Denvers, 3 chuck eyes. We got 4 chuck roasts. We got a bunch of scrap that would be turned into ground beef or maybe some dog food, and then a little bit of stew meat. And so 20-pound piece of meat cut up into something that is going to save you guys a whole bunch of money. Here you go, Sash. Forget Mr. Maximus as well. Of course, I'm going to give some to my dogs because the dogs have done a good job guarding the house and just being good animals. So, like I said, any professional butchers would probably cringe seeing this. It's not, bad for the first time through. I think that this is something that, obviously anyone can do. Just need a sharp knife and some room to do it. And then, like anything, you practice till you get better, and then you get better and better results. But again, this will save you guys quite a bit of money. And, it's about getting healthy. And if you can, afford to nourish yourself in a way that's appropriate, then by all means do so. This is something that is very, very helpful. All right, this is some of the Denver steak that's been cut up, cooked up, and topped with a little bit of Malden sea salt. Smells delicious. Can't wait to dig into this stuff. Well, this is the Denver steaks, and looks great. Gonna have first bite here. Wow, good stuff. If you are struggling with your health, now think about how nutrition impacts that and what you can do to get better. And like I said, in general, eat a better diet, get sleep, exercise, be active, get out in the sunshine, deal with stress. If you need help with that, and sometimes it's tough to do it alone. If you want a team that will be behind you, every step of the day and provide you access to help 24 hours a day, then check out Rivera.com. This is a company that I helped to found that has helped hundreds and hundreds of people to reverse diseases and to just take their life back and get out of the, unplug themselves from the matrix. So check out Rivera.com. There's a link below. We'd love to have you, and I'd love to talk to you personally.